From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. My guest today can best be described as a pioneer for his significant contributions to the sport. Paul Fayard has competed at the highest level, having a national and world championship in four-way under his belt. He has served as an instructor, rigger, pilot, drop zone owner, operator, and most famously, aircraft owner. It should also be mentioned that he has trained more than 150 jump pilots, many of them still flying today. If you haven't met Paul, you have jumped from one of his aircraft, as he has owned a total of 62 jump planes throughout his career. At one time, he owned 34 planes and has provided aircraft to over 50 drop zones. What made Paul unique is he had empathy for his DZO customers, because he himself owned and operated Carolina Sky Sports for 35 years and Florida Skydiving Center, Lake Wales, as a co-owner and eventually full owner between 2003 and 2007. Name a major world record skydiving event, and it's likely Paul was there. He has seen it all and done it all, and I'm thrilled to welcome him to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, James.
A real pleasure. It seems like we should start from a little bit of the beginning. Where are you actually from?
Originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. I made my beginning skydives in that area, and then eventually worked around the eastern part of the United States building parachute operations for the owner-operator at Xenia, Ohio. And then eventually in 1973 went on my own.
In our conversations, in our time together, I understand you grew up, for lack of a better term, poor.
I was from the other side of the tracks. We never wanted for a meal. We always had food, but we didn't have the other luxury of things that most families did. But we had a good family, good, close-knit type family.
Do you have siblings?
Oh, yeah. I have 9 of us. My dad had been married twice. He referred to the first 4 as the first litter, and the second 5 as his second litter. I'm from the second litter.
So how is it that a kid from the other side of the tracks got into making his very first skydive?
As a junior in high school, I was sitting in class in my high school, and I was able to look out the window and watch parachutes come down. School's out, so I drove down real quick to the airport that was there, which is just a grass strip at that time, and nobody knew who to call or who was there or anything about it other than there were some jumpers. From that point on, I wanted to do it, but didn't have an avenue to find out where until in 1966, the guy who moved into the apartment next to mine was an instructor, of all things. So after push from him, I took the opportunity and went out, made my first jump that day, and that's the day the direction of my life changed. I was in my second year. I actually started the third year at the University of Cincinnati with high hopes of being a CPA. And boy, was that a change in life.
And what did your parents think about you making that first skydive?
They thought it was pretty unique. They didn't say much about it. They knew I was adventurous, and I did all the sports there was available to me in high school. And I've even at 17 and 18 years old, I drove pretty fast cars and race cars later on, and so it fell right into line with me being adventurous and go for it.
So did you complete college?
No. I knew my direction of life. That day, the day my feet hit the ground, I knew where I was going to go.
Wow. So where did you go? Where did you go right after that first jump?
And I made a couple, 3 jumps in Indiana and some in Kentucky. But eventually, in my student status, ended up at Xenia, Ohio. And from there, just stayed there for the next 7 years, working at the Parachute Center and then working, building parachute operations for that individual. I'd go find a location, get it started, hire the people, get them trained, and move to the next location. So that was my job, and doing a lot of jumps in the meantime.
You did like 3,000 jumps in a very short space of time.
The first 7 years, I made 3,000 parachute jumps, all under round parachutes.
That's incredible.
A fun time.
It bit you hard.
As I say, my feet hit the ground, and my life, I knew where I wanted to go. I could tell. In my vision, I seen where skydiving, parachuting would be as it is today. Everybody would laugh at me because skydiving was in its beginnings. Military surplus equipment was the only thing we had to jump, modified for sport use. And shortly after, we had our first sport parachute to jump in. But I kept telling everybody where the sport would be. I said, it's going to be like a ski lodge. You're going to go and you're going to spend a week or 2 weeks, and all you're going to do is just jump, 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 jump. And everybody said, just laugh at me. That's done around the world now.
Yo, a quick break here to address the Drop Zone owners listening to the pod. If you're a DZO, then you know the insanity of taking your passion and making it your business. Why'd you do that? Running a DZ is hard. Between the stressors of liability, 30-day payment terms on fuel after 4 weeks of miserable weather, and angry staff who are convinced they've been skipped in the rotation, you need a tool that helps reduce your stress. Enter Burble Software.
All right.
Conceived by a DZO who's been in the trenches just like you, Burble is the most sophisticated manifest and booking software on the planet. Your life as a DZO is hard enough, so don't be that DZO who tries to save a few bucks using software that wasn't built for us. Burble, the must-have drop zone management software for the 182 DZ to the multi-turbine monster. Burble. Earlier this year, we all gathered at the International Skydiving Museum and Hall of Fame celebration event in Eloy, Arizona, and there were your teammates at that table. Share with me that team.
That team was put together in 1973. I had been competing in four-way. I have had a second, a third, and a fourth, but never a first. But so I was always competing in four-way. We put together a team. We didn't think we would be that good, and in fact, we didn't know how good we were. Affiliate operation in Bardstown, Kentucky had won the 1972 Nationals. There was no world meet at that time. They were kind of expected to repeat in 73. Another team that was put together at another affiliate, Dropzone, out of Xenia, Ohio, was expected to give them a run or go second. We were not figured to be in the running at all. We had a training camp mainly for the number one and number two thinking in Missouri as we headed to Tahlequah, Oklahoma for the national championships. And we cleaned their clocks. That's the first time we realized that we were pretty good and had a chance.
And of course, that team would go on to win the Nationals and then the World Meet.
We went on to win the Nationals and not win. We ran away with it.
Are you amazed by the four-way teams of today in terms of...
Yeah, it is. I mean, the parachute equipment we jumped back then, you can't even begin to compare it to the new modern lightweight equipment that we have now. It was more difficult to fly your body in the air. So the teams that are jumping now have the wind tunnels to train in besides in free fall. So the skills and the quality of the teams have really, really increased in the the last 15 years.
So you win the nationals and you win the world meet. During this period of time, you had been opening and setting up drop zones, and then you decided to go out on your own.
Well, 73 is when we won, and I had just 2 weeks prior given my 2-week notice of the place I operated at or worked for, with no plans, no idea where it was going to go. We then turn around and win the nationals and go on and win the world meet. Meeting other individuals, we had planned on trying to open up an operation down in Florida. When the opportunity to open one up in North Carolina came about, we knew nothing about the location, but when you're starving and you have no money in your pocket, you need to get to work. So we decided to move to Lewisburg, North Carolina. From there, it just snowballed into a major parachute operation.
Of course, that would be Carolina Sky Sports that you ran for 35
years.
A person that was instrumental in helping you, because when you got started, you, as you told me earlier this evening at dinner, you basically didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. A person that was key in helping you was Gene Paul. Do you mind sharing, Gene Paul Thacker, would you mind sharing a little bit of how he helped you get your start?
Well, he had planned on opening up a satellite operation from his operation in Rayford, and the opportunity for him to do that was not to be had. When I asked him if he needed an employee to work for him and so on, he said, well, there's a good opportunity for a parachute operation in Lewisburg, North Carolina. And he said, take my airplane and fly that weekend. And, of course, I did, and realized that it has some potential, not knowing anything about the surrounding area and what our clientele would be. It was 2 days. I just basically never got out of the airplane. It was that busy. So went to work to try and find an airplane. My wife used her credit union, so we didn't have any down payment or anything. And we bought a Cessna 182, and the next weekend we were in operation. That was August 20th of 1973. And by the end of January, we had 3 single-engine airplanes and 1 twin-engine airplane. It grew that fast.
That's remarkable. And, of course, 35 years in a flash.
Yeah, 35 years. We became most likely one of the top 10 parachute operations in the United States with the volume that we were doing there and, of course, the aircraft we owned.
As I mentioned in the intro, Paul, through the course of your business or your career, you owned over 60 jump aircraft.
62, I think, is the number that we had, not all at one time, but buy and sell. If I could buy a lower time aircraft, I would buy it and sell the highest time airplane, and kept doing that and kept expanding the number of aircraft during that time to the point that I think at one point we were operating 34 aircraft.
Not bad for a kid from the other side of the tracks in Ohio.
Not bad.
Tell me about purchasing that first airplane, because when you don't have 2 nickels to rub together, 2 pennies to rub together, that's not something you just tuck away some money for and then buy. Can you share the story of acquiring your first airplane?
Well, the first airplane was a single-engine airplane. That was through a credit union. That was not too much of a problem. But we very quickly grew to the point that we needed a faster, more modern airplane, and that was buying a turbine aircraft. None of the banks would talk to a parachute operation because one of their questions was, well, how much do you have to pay those guys to jump out of your airplane? Or how much gas are you going to sell to pay for that airplane? So the banks was not an issue. Friend of mine that I had met several years earlier, back in 1973, in fact, had an operation up in the Shenandoah Valley area of Virginia. I called him. I was trying to see if I could get a lesser aircraft and things like that. I told him I couldn't get financing to buy a turbine, and so he just invited me to come up and look and see what he had. And I did, and he showed me a turbine airplane, and I told him that the banks wouldn't finance a turbine airplane for me. And he said, you don't need to. I'm going to finance it for you. 3 months later, I needed the second airplane because we were growing very, very fast. I called him and asked him for if he had a second airplane. He said, yeah, I'll have it ready for you in 3 weeks. That was the end of the conversation.
And you were off to the races with plane number one.
Off to the races. I paid the first one off fairly quick. Second one took just a little bit longer, but in 3 years I owned both airplanes. And using that as my assets, I was able to start expanding into more airplanes. It went fast. We grew very fast.
This industry is tough to be financially successful, and you've been a very successful businessman without a college education.
Right.
You are savvy, and we had dinner earlier this evening, and I said to you, you found something and you were good at it. So my question is, how do you explain your business acumen, A, and then B, how did you get so proficient so quickly?
Well, I quickly realized that there was a need for turbine aircraft around the United States and Canada, and other places, operations were having trouble with financing to buy those. So I used my first two aircraft that now were paid for as collateral. I went to an asset lender. That was a fairly easy method of getting the money, but it's 12 and 14% interest. My idea there was, and of course it's a 5-year loan on the aircraft. My idea was that I would lease it out, and if it paid the payment, if I recouped enough money from it to pay the payment, pay the insurance, and maintain the aircraft, at 5 years I would own the asset. After, paying them off or paying them down, using that, it kept snowballing very, very fast to the point it was huge.
You make it sound easy, right, Paul? Because you executed it time and time and time and time again. But we didn't see anyone else really doing it at the scale that you were doing it. And I can only imagine, because there's a lot of risk. And how were you able to feel comfortable managing that much risk?
Being in the business of building parachute centers and operating them, you have to understand the limitations of the money coming into the operators. The winter times they're tough. So you got to be flexible in the renting of aircraft to them. Some weekends they can pay you, but 2 weekends later they'll catch up. And having that understanding made me comfortable. Not once did I not get paid. I had sometimes wait a month for them to start catching up. Other places longer. But knowing the people, and of course the skydiving industry is a very close-knit bunch of A-type personality people. So, but knowing most of them as they were friends and you knew them quite well, I didn't feel that I was taking so much risk or it didn't weigh heavily on me. I mean, it just ran.
At one time, you had over 30 aircraft, and I just can't imagine the logistics of owning that and the amount of monies coming in and going out between the revenue that they're generating and the maintenance. And I mean, would you share with our audience how large your staff was that were maintaining these aircraft?
We had a number. I think we had about 12 to 15 full-time pilots because we had a fairly large fleet at home. But we also had grown to the point we had 20 aircraft mechanics. 5 of those mechanics were not only A&Ps, they were IAs, including myself. I always had the idea that I will never get involved in anything that I can't do myself. That included cleaning the toilets to fly on the airplanes. And that paid off. I'm a senior and a master parachute rigger and commercial pilot, 33,000 hours as a pilot. But again, it's just knowing the jobs and being able to do anything at any time, and it worked.
It's remarkable that you have the skill set to be very good at business and finance, the ability to fly aircraft with an incredible skill set, and understand the mechanics. There are few like you in the entire world with that combination of skill for a guy, once again, that never finished college.
Well, I didn't finish college because I was dumb. At the beginning of my junior year, I made that jump, so I knew the direction of my life. But maintenance-wise, I was always working on cars. So, and I'm pretty good at it. I understood the maintenance and of the cars, and I could do it all myself. Being a pilot, again, going back to high school, my physics teacher gave me my first airplane ride. And I was years later, I seen him in one of our high school reunions, and I got to talk with him and tell him what he'd done.
Without question, you don't build and grow without making mistakes. Was there an early lesson that was a hard lesson but a valuable one?
You know, there was a number of mistakes. Nothing major, but I mean, there was days that we were pulling the cushions away from the couch to look for money to go buy milk. I mean, it was tough at times, but I knew where I was going. I knew I was doing it right, and I just have to keep plugging at it. I just taught myself as I went along. I knew where I wanted to go and what it needed to get there.
On the contrary of those early mistakes, was there a particular deal or something that was key to spring forwarding you from owning a few aircraft, say, to many, many more, much more rapidly?
Oh, I could go on forever. I didn't get where I'm at today by myself. There's been a lot of people along the way who have stepped forward to help me, trying to buy a DC-3 and try to get financing. Tough. And the guy I was trying to buy from got tired of dealing with the bank that we were trying to get the loan for to buy the DC-3 from him. He slammed the phone down. He picked the phone back up. He punched one button, and he said, "Get over here. I'm going to finance an airplane for this guy." And he did.
Paul, whenever I have conversation with you about your past, anytime you say, "I didn't get here alone." When we had dinner earlier, when we talk about Jean Paul Thacker and folks that have financed you, you get emotional because clearly it's your 40 plus years past had a career that was 40 odd years. Jean Paul was very early on, and now you're in retirement. And as we recall those times, say 40 plus years, it hits you.
When you come from nothing, and then you have these people that step forward to assist you in growing and everything else, I do.
I'll say that you have paid that forward. I recall being a young DZ manager for Danny Smith at Skydive Carolina, a man that looks up to you as a mentor and who's leased airplanes from you, and you've helped him acquire aircraft. I very vividly remember a very busy weekend, and there was an maintenance issue with the aircraft, and we had a ton of tandems on the books. I will never forget this. We contacted you, and the response was, "I will have you a solution." And literally within 90 minutes, another Otter was touching down.
Yep.
Save the day. And that happened more than once. And I do know that one of those occasions, the Otter was pulled from your own drop zone to your detriment at the time. I think it may have been coming from Lake Wales. Regardless, it was so appreciated. It was so appreciated. You clearly paid it forward.
When you're dealing in business, you have an obligation to take care of your customer. And I pride myself to always be ready to do whatever's necessary to help them along the way. With our military contracts, we had a 99% dispatch rate. I believe that to be unheard of. We had two major incidents, one in Arizona, one in Canada, where at the end of the day they had some maintenance issues with the aircraft. And in each case, they had another airplane sitting there the next morning at no cost.
Don't get service like that these days. If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to invite you to be a member of a budding community with me on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests and gain access to some show swag. It's pretty sweet. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. One thing that most jumpers became familiar with was the CASAs.
Yeah.
And, we saw those in the X Games and the World Free Fall Conventions and, in the heyday of the boogies through the 2000s, everybody wanted to jump a CASA. How this aircraft was so beyond. It was such a huge love for skydivers with that tailgate aircraft, and if I recall, it held 32 jumpers. How is it that you decided you needed to get CASAs? What was the cause for that?
I was looking for a tailgate aircraft. I knew that the potential of putting a tailgate aircraft in service in the civilian market would be a whirlwind. I looked at several. I had several demonstrated to me. I got a call that there was a CASA that was coming up for sale up in Delaware. I was actually on vacation in Puerto Rico at the time. I called the guy. We made the deal over the phone. I said, I'll be up to look at it as soon as I get home, which was 4 or 5 days later. We flew up, looked at it, and bought the aircraft and put the first CASA into service.
Did military contracts follow shortly after, or was that?
A little bit here and there. Most of them were fill-ins for other operators here and there. Later on, it was even Blackwater we filled in for, but it was a company out of Florida, Presidential Airways, that we would fill in for them quite often. And then we started picking up contracts on our own and this and that. Eventually, in the later years, it boiled down to the point that we were told not to back up this other company because they would fail their contract and they could come straight to us. And that happened. You got to do service. If you're doing a customer with an aircraft, you've got to service him. I pride myself that we always did that.
In your career, can you identify one of your toughest days as a DZO, and then secondly as an owner of a huge fleet of aircraft that are on offer for various folks?
I guess the worst day of my life came when I was getting ready to get married, and I'd been promised ownership, partial ownership of an operation. My potential wife and I went together, talked to him, and I was told he was not going to ever give me anything. And that day, I gave him his 2 weeks' notice with no idea where I was going in life at that point. I knew it was going to be parachuting, but I had no money and no idea where I was going to go. But it worked out.
I'd say it did. Do you look at that as maybe, though you just said it was one of the worst days of your life, was a critical moment in your life? Oh,
it was devastating because I'd worked so hard for that individual. A promise is a promise. And he backed out of it. It was quite disheartening.
I thought you were going to say something different. I recall that during your tenure at Carolina Sky Sports, that there was a fire.
Oh.
Would you share the story of the fire there?
1999. We had a very, very busy day. It was a Friday. I think we had something like 35, 36, 37 tandems, pretty nonstop flying all day long. Beautiful day. We closed up, locked up, and it was, 10 o'clock, 10:30. I went out 8, went home. And then around midnight, we get a call from one of the military guys who was their first time there, said, "Your building is on fire." And I said, and he asked what could he do. I says, "Can you get in the building at all?" And he said, "No, everything's locked up." I said, "Break a window, get in, try to get some of my student gear, my tandem rigs out if you can." And this guy didn't know me from Adam. This was his first time there. They were able to get in and start getting some of the rigs out before the fire engulfed the entire building. We had 8 tandem rigs, which is the real expensive rigs. And we had, as I say, everything pretty much was unpacked except for the 8 older rigs. All the new stuff was in the packing area, unpacked. Everybody was tired that day. There was one brand new rig that was just finished assembled, but never jumped. All 8 of the new ones burnt. They were able to get the old ones out. They were able to get some of the student equipment out, other equipment, and the entire building went down. When we got out there, it's so disheartening to see everything you've worked for, built, because we built that building out of an old T hangar that was open air T hangar when we closed it in and this and that and made it pretty good. We had just finished remodeling the whole back half of it and with new manifest area, roll-up door at the manifest area, beautiful packing area, and that's where the fire started in the ballast of the lights that were there and caught the attic on fire and then engulfed the entire building from that. So you're looking at everything you've built and working. And by the way, we had never operated in the manger part of the building other than the packing area that day. So some of the new stuff never even got used. Some of it was not even paid for yet. So that was a horrible day. My wife, Nancy, was upset to the point that she was ready to give up at that point. But we were in operation at 9 o'clock that next morning in the hangar use. The biggest problem we had of the day is since you stow your lines with rubber bands at that time, we ran out of rubber bands. So as the day was finishing, we were losing one rig because we couldn't pack it after another. So it was a tough day.
Paul, you have a fighting spirit. There is no telling you no.
I can't is not in my vocabulary. It's find a way. There is a way somewhere. You got to find it. You got to seek it out and take care of it. And that's always been my attitude.
We are sitting here in a conference room in Florida going through meetings with the International Skydiving Museum and Hall of Fame.
Right.
And when you joined this board, you said very clearly, there will be a museum.
I did.
I will make sure of it.
I did.
And I believe you because your track record says that if you say something, it's going to happen.
And what a lot of people here in this meeting today doesn't know, we're close. We're very close.
Let's go back to another tough day. You and Nancy were the owners of Lake Wales.
Yes.
During that time, you essentially lost the drop zone to a major hurricane. Hurricane Charlie. Another bad day.
You remember things like that. I was at Quincy, Illinois, flying a big event, and somebody brought a picture up that was in a paper showing my Twin Otter kind of ragged out, sitting outside the hangar that was on the ground. That's my first indication that we had a problem down in Florida. Couldn't reach anybody because nobody had had telephone lines or anything like that. So I had to just sit back and wait. I couldn't leave where I was at, and I had to rely on Betty Hill, who I was thoroughly a major good, responsible person. I had to rely on her that she would take care of things the right way, and of course she did. The idea was, okay, what do we do now to get it in service? So we immediately went out and got some mobile type office space in within the next, I think, less than 10 days. The airplane, I went down and flew that airplane home myself. And I don't know if I should tell you this shape it was in, but we had it back in service that week. With, of course, with the number of mechanics I had, we turned everybody loose on it, and it was back in the air, I think, in like 4 days.
Paul, you're a strong man. I mean, you put your mind to something, proud, but do you ever have a day where you go, this is hard. This is...
Never.
And that's not bravado speaking.
No. Roll with the punch.
You had a lot of punches you had to roll with.
Yeah. But that part of my life, I would never change any part of it. I've enjoyed everything I've done this entire time.
You know, most married couples cannot work together. often when, particularly skydivers, they know Paul Fayard, but they know Nancy Fayard too.
Yeah, she's, we work quite well together. She came out to make a parachute jump in Xenia, Ohio. I was the instructor of the day. I took a liking to her immediately, her of me. We started dating within the next 3 or 4 days. We spent 4 years dating, and we just celebrated 50 years of marriage.
Remarkable. Congratulations.
Thank you.
During your career, this crazy sport and this world of aviation has taken you literally all over the world.
It has.
And some of the stories that you have shared with me have taken you to the most obscure parts of this globe. Can you share with our audience maybe some more notable adventures?
Well, as I think I explained to you earlier today, one of them was buying a Twin Otter out of Bujumbura, Burundi. A friend of mine who wanted spare parts that came with the aircraft, and I wanted the aircraft. It was involved in an aircraft accident during the genocides. The airplane was shot up pretty bad. The pilot who was flying it and landed it there was injured, but not killed. But he ran off the runway and wrecked the airplane, and the airplane had sat there for, I think, 3 years, maybe might even been 4 years. So we had been talking to a fellow we identified, and he wanted to be called Captain Dismas. Turned out to be an extremely nice individual. He met us when we landed at Burundi, Bujumbura, rather, the city. He met us as we walked down the Pan American roller stairs that roll because they don't have gates. We introduced ourselves as we walked down the steps, and he says, "Give me your passports." Put a $20 bill in the picture page area with the 20 sticking out each side, and hand them to me back to me. And I looked at the guy who was with me who wanted the parts. I said, "Andre," I says, "we don't give our passports to anybody." But we had been talking to this individual for more than 6 months. We decided to go ahead and do it, but just watch closely what happens. As we walked through not only the security, but the customs and the immigrations and everything else, he took the passports, threw them over on a desk behind the guy that we were supposed to talk to, and told him to take care of them for him. And we kept right on walking, right on through the immigrations and the security and all. And I looked over to Andre and I says, "I think we're in pretty good hands." And later that day, they delivered the passports back, but it was minus the $20 in each of the passports. And then, of course, the story leading up to it, going to get the aircraft, I assembled all my mechanics together. I said I need 2 mechanics to go with me to help me take this aircraft apart because it's not flyable, and stick it in 2 containers, the wings and parts of it in one and the fuselage in the other. So I needed 2 mechanics to help me take it apart, put it in there, and we'll get them shipped to get the aircraft shipped home. So I asked told them we're going to go fly into Johannesburg. We'll spend a day there, stay in a very, very nice place, and so on, and then move on to Rwanda, which was the place where we had to get the flight out of Rwanda to Bujumbura, Burundi. And I kept telling them all the things about what we're going to do. They're going to get their salary. They're going to get all expenses. They won't have to have any money with them whatsoever. So I asked, okay, what 2 wants to go? And none of the mechanics raised their hands. Their thought was they didn't want to go to a third world country. And, of course, I had the last laugh on that one. But my groundskeeper, who was very mechanically inclined, was back in the back, jumping up and down, raising his hand. He wants to go. He wants to go. So I said, "Rob, you can go." I said, "I still need 1 mechanic." I still had at that point, no volunteers. Later that night, when I was home, I got a call in, and the guy said, "I'll go, but I'm worried for my life at going to a third world country." And I explained to him it's safe and this and that, but he said, I'll go. One thing I didn't tell you earlier today was that the kid's grandfather came to see him the night before he leaves to basically give him his last rites because he knew he wouldn't be coming back. And that happened. So we flew into Johannesburg. We stayed in a nice place with nice huts and with showers, hot water, and everything else. And we're right beside a game preserve. Next morning, my groundskeeper is out there drinking his coffee 3 feet from the lions, which across the fence, and talking to the lions. And we flew the next day up to Rwanda. We stayed in Hotel Rwanda. We went to the Genocides Museum, which was really tough. You don't come out of there with dry eyes, and learned a lot about what went on. The next morning we flew on to Bujumbura. The next 2 days we spent taking the aircraft apart, putting it in the containers. And my handler, Captain Dismas, that was there, I said, we need a really good place to eat tonight to celebrate finishing the job. And he pointed up to the top of the mountain, which was right beside the town. He says, there's a nice French restaurant up there. So we went up there that night for dinner. I had everybody with us and so on, and really, really good food. And I leaned back as we were finishing up dinner, and I looked at the mechanic. I says, what do you think of this third world country? And so I got the last laugh at it. He realized that what his thinking of Africa was like is not all true in Africa. And, of course, he had to spill that story and things like that when he got back to everybody else. But it taught me a lot about general people's attitude who've never been to Africa or there, that they really don't understand what goes on in Africa. Yeah, there's some really tough places, but all of Africa is not that way. So it was a good learning experience for me, too.
I'm curious, and I'm not a pilot, but I'm intrigued by you have over 30,000 hours. Mm-hmm. Have you ever been scared?
Early on, I've had a few tough times. Right in the beginning, I took off in a 30-knot crosswind in a Cessna 180. The yoke is stuck, completely turned with the left to the left to offset the crosswind. I was concerned at that point, but what I do, and so I had to turn the airplane around and go back in and land with that condition, and it was no problem.
This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. Paul, you mentioned in the earlier days of your career, you got scared with that crosswind landing. But surely, once you've even advanced as a pilot with all the places and conditions you've flown in, have you not had going, ooh, that was a little bit hairy? In that 33,000 hours, I spent 14 years crop dusting. So as I tell you, there's not too many days that you don't come back with hash marks in your underwear. There's some things you do in there that says, oh, I'm not going to do that again. So, but there was then, yeah. Back to my first year, I crashed an airplane. And the reason being is I had the farmer calling out the power lines, spray this field, spray that field, but he neglected to tell me about one set of power lines that crossed the field just as I would be entering the field. It took the vertical and the rudder completely off the fuselage. The fuselage itself looked like the old-style can openers that you punch the sharp end of it in, and then you actually levered it to cut the top off. And that's what the fuselage looked like. But I was able to keep it airborne for a while with no rudder or vertical with torque, with a runway sitting 90 degrees to me, and I couldn't get the airplane face that direction.
And I literally told myself, if you're going to stay alive, you better put this thing down. And I was able to put it down in the bean field. And of course, North Carolina soybeans grow very tall. And it came to a pretty quick stop in that and raised up on its nose. It sat there for a second, and I exhaled, and it went on over on its back. So no injuries whatsoever, but my airplane was destroyed. I had my hands full for a few short seconds there, figuring out if I'm going to live or not through it. But it came out okay.
Amazing. I imagine you have forgotten more about flying than most people ever know.
I've flown a lot of different airplanes, and I feel comfortable in if it's got wings and a motor, I can fly it.
Any particular aircraft that you loved flying the most?
I love my Beech 18s. I love flying them. I feel comfortable in them. I don't care what the wind's doing. Of course, 6,000 hours in Beech 18, 12,000 hours tailwheel time.
As you reflect on your career, and you've done so much, is there a particular moment or event that, as you reflect, go, wow, that was special. That thing we did was special?
I honestly believe that my purchase and introduction of the CASAs to the skydiving community was a major impact in skydiving. The big events, the big relative work events that were the attempts on that, the whole introduction of that aircraft. And as I think I earlier told you, I've owned 21 of them during the course of my career. Not all at once. I think it was 6 or 7 I owned at one time. The idea of also the military contracts that I was able to secure and do, and the work I did with them, and the flying I got to do with that, and doing the job right was, I thought, pretty good in my career.
Who did you look up to? Who did you admire?
Well, I think there's several people, and it doesn't really have to do about skydiving. It's the people who gave me my first opportunity to work for them. That was Jim West. The help from Gene Paul Thacker, the help from Carl Stoffus. I mean, there's so many. And my wife. She knew me. She met me when I was skydiving and working in it. She married me when I was in it. She's been by my side for 54 years, 50 of it married, and she's still there. She hadn't killed me yet.
Anyone knows that she's an amazing, amazing lady.
Oh, she is. She is.
She's
extremely intelligent.
She's gentle.
Yeah.
What frustrates you? You know, being that you've operated on such a high level with professionalism and being a man of your word, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you see. Do you have any pet peeves?
Ignorance.
Ignorance.
I can't tolerate it. I guess I should, but I just don't tolerate it. People try to talk over what they're capable of doing or what they know, and I'm standing right there and I know better. I don't have respect for those people.
For those young drop zone owners out there that are listening and have aspirations to grow their drop zones, what advice do you share?
I was told very recently that they operate their DZO the modern way. The modern way is if there's a cloud in the sky in the morning, the DZO is closed for the day. That's, in my opinion, will never work. There's so many things that go on during the course of the day. The biggest thing is the camaraderie between the people, the chance to sit and talk to the people, talk about skydiving, talk about life, get rigger work done, get all kinds of different things done, go out to dinner at night. You know, and everybody else knows, part of the skydiving is the love of everybody. It's a small, even though it's a large sport, everybody is close together. I mean, no matter where you go in life or what country you go, there's a place to stay that night or any night. Somebody will offer you a place to stay. It's that type of people. As I said before, I love my life. The way I've done it, I wouldn't change a thing.
You're in the midst of enjoying retirement. What does a typical day in the life of Paul Fayard look like these days?
Retirement. I bought 2 airplanes in the last 6 weeks. I like to keep my finger in it. Aviation, nobody gets it out of their blood. I still enjoy flying. I don't jump anymore. I made my last jump in 2008. I enjoy working on my cars, checking on my airplanes, traveling. But as I said, when we sold out the majority of the assets in 2008 and we thought we retired, we got busier than we ever had gotten. I had some things I'd been working on prior to the selling out, so it was time to do those, and I've been quite successful at that. I still sell parts. I still find engines for people, mostly African countries that I've met. I've met the president of Botswana. I've met his brother, met his brother's son, sold him airplanes, bought airplanes from him. I've enjoyed everything.
It's an extraordinary career. Do you miss it? I mean, you're still very busy and you still have your thumb in the aviation side, but
yeah, I miss the people. I don't miss operating a parachute operation anymore. I miss the people. Our customers were our friends. Those talks on the rainy days, the dinners, like the one we just had. It was an amazing time. I think, what was there, 14, 15 of us there at the table? It was everybody. It was just a good time, sitting, communicating, talking about old times, about new times, about the museum, everything about it. And the last thing is the museum. I'm the vice president now, and I was given the opportunity to seek out financing to build our museum building. And I enjoy doing that. And I said in the very beginning, I will get this building built. And I'm going to. We're close. And I've enjoyed the work. It's been a lesson I've learned. We're at a time that banks don't want to lend money. Interest rates are high, but we're getting the job done. And it's also been a teamwork. I mean, there's been quite a few number of people who have helped me along the way with this. Jim McCormick, Chris Needles, Kurt, the president now. I mean, it's been a team effort.
When we talk about skydiving, you light up. It's in your blood. And I'd say that this industry is lucky that Paul Fayard has been in it, because you have really pushed the sport forward. And I look forward to joining you when we walk through the doors of the new museum and looking at our history, of which you are part of.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you've done for all of us. We are grateful.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies, Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.